So I'm working on one of these little tillers today, little 2-stroke Mantis, and customer states won't start. It's been sitting around for about a year. And I just pulled off the air filter cover, and you can see that the air filter has quite a lot of debris on it, also inside of here. And so my first comment before I show you what I found is just if you're seeing this and you don't want to be a small engine mechanic or anything like that, that's fine. But just take the covers off of your stuff occasionally and just wash that out with a garden hose and some soap. If the filter is of a fleecy, fabricy material, you can wash that out real vigorously. You won't hurt it. If it's a paper type, you can even rinse that out, let it dry in the sun, and as long as there's no holes in the paper, that's still better than nothing. You don't always have to replace filters right away, although once they get really bad, you do. But let me take this apart now and show you what I found. Well, I got that little carburetor off of the tiller, and I cleaned the outside already, but I thought I would open it for the very first time with y'all. And a quick overview. So here's your throttle. The choke is achieved through the air filter housing, so you don't see a choke here. This is your fuel outlet line, and if you push, you'll see a little bit come out of there, not very much. That basically purges the air out of the system. This is your fuel inlet. And then you have your 2 adjustment screws. Whichever adjustment screw is closer to the engine or the throttle plate, that's your air mixture screw for at idle, and this is your air mixture screw for wide open throttle. So let's zip this off. This is a very standard style carburetor, what's called a cube carburetor. On one side you have the metering diaphragm, on the other side you have the fuel pump, and then you have this purge bulb assembly. Underneath this purge bulb assembly is the metering diaphragm, that's this guy. There's a couple ways to get these up. Most of the time you can just peel them, and the disc always goes down. So if you have one of these, doesn't matter make, model, if you have one of these and you're not sure which way it always goes down, the big disc. And the gasket is always between the carb body and the disc. And you can already, my first hint is already here if you listen. Okay, you hear all that crinkling? This is supposed to be able to flutter with engine RPM. And engine RPM on these things is very high. So any stiffness like this causes lots of problems. So that's the first problem. This all looks pretty clean. You can check the adjustment of the height of this little lever arm, and you do that with these tools. So you find out what manufacturer it is, in this case Zama, and then you find the marking on the carburetor to tell you what kind it is. It's over here, and it's hard for you to see, but it says C1L. So then you would find the corresponding marking here, in this case just C1, and you would take this gasket off and you would rest we got a new puppy. You rest the tool like this and you check to see that this is in the right place. Yeah, anyway, let me take off the fuel pump side. Now the fuel pump pumping diaphragm doesn't seem to be as susceptible to going brittle like these metering diaphragms do. It's a different material, it's a different style. And actually I misspoke. The metering diaphragm doesn't necessarily flutter with engine speed. So this is your fuel pump diaphragm. This is a totally different material, but what you can see in here is that there's a lot of sludge. There's a lot of junk. So you can also see some debris in the corner there. So there's been some junk that's gotten sucked into here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reuse this because I don't have a replacement on hand. It wouldn't hurt to replace it, of course, but it's probably still fine. Subjectively, this feels like most of them feel. And I'm going to replace this metering diaphragm, and I'll show you that super quick. I keep 4 metering diaphragms in stock. And it's important not to just look at the shape and dimensions of the holes. It's also important to look at the nib. So some of these are flat in the center and some of these are raised. Hopefully you can see the difference there. And so even though you might have two different gaskets that fit the same bolt pattern, you have to check to see if you're pulling out one with a raised nib or not. This one is flat. That's really important, because if you put a raised in for a flat or a flat in for a raised, then it's the equivalent of having this lever arm way out of adjustment, which will cause problems. So I'm gonna remove these caps and screws, clean it out. I'm not gonna use an ultrasonic cleaner, I'm just gonna use carb spray, but I'm gonna be careful. You don't wanna shove carb spray through some of these orifices. That can be bad for the check valve, which is in here. And I'll try and point that out to you. So basically, if you look here in the throat, you see this little silver thing dead center. And in there is a check valve. And that check valve, I've disassembled them before when I've been throwing away a carburetor. Those check valves are very sensitive and delicate. So I'm not going to I'm not going to edit this and show you the machine running. If I've posted this video, then what I just described worked. And if I have to do something else, you won't be watching this video, you'll be watching a different one. Last thing to point out is normally on the fuel pump side of the whole setup, just on the opposite side of this needle is a screen, and you can see that screen, there's debris in there. So the way that you get him out is you remove this. Sorry, let me get rid of this. It's not so much in your way. You remove this guy, and that's basically a 5-piece deal. You have the needle. Oops. You have the needle itself. Then you have the lever. You have a spring. You have a pivot shaft, and then you have the hold down screw. And what you do is you take a very fine piece of wire, or like a blow. Oh, I'll just show it right here. It's like this. Sorry folks, there's a few distractions here today. Not on my A game. So you basically take this and you put it down the hole that the needle was in. And when you do that, like so. Oh, I need to get a thicker one. 1 second. I'm working on my editing game, by the way, for anyone who's watching, so that you don't have to put up with this kind of stuff as often. My daughter needs me here because the dog is up to something. Anyway, when you put this through, oh, you know what? I'm not going to be able to demonstrate it because I got to get a different tool. But basically, there's this little screen in here, and oh, there it goes. So you can flick them out from this side. Some people call this a screen, some people call it a sieve. You could call it a filter, but this keeps debris from getting into that needle area and the metering diaphragm side of things. So you can clean that out. And again, if you're watching this, then I've reassembled it and it's up and running and working with just a new metering diaphragm and a thorough cleaning. And if you're not watching this video, then it's something else and I have a different video posted. All right, sorry I was a little disorganized today. Give this a thumbs down if you didn't like it. Go check out Steve's Small Engine Saloon. Great guy, really funny. I've learned a lot from him, and you'll probably find his videos more interesting and better edited. Take care, folks.